What's up, my movers and shakers? I'm Dave, this is MS Paints, and
I'm back, and I'm better than ever.
anyone who has been following my YouTube channel or my social medias and gives a shit will notice that I posted teasers of this diorama that I've done for Pirates of the Dread Sea and pretty much just promptly vanished. It's been a while and I didn't drop a tutorial video till now, and there was really no kind of follow-up to that in a lot of ways. The reason being, I bought a house and until a few weeks ago had been living in my music studio slash painting studio for about 4 years. It was pretty fucking cozy. I ain't gonna lie, it was pretty cozy. Yeah, a few weeks ago we bought and moved into our first house during a global pandemic, but thanks to my dad and co-workers who helped me do the move, everything's pretty much settling down now. I can get back to work. I can pick up business again with a YouTube channel, so I'm pretty hyped for that. So thank you everyone involved. Big thanks to my patron, you know who you are, for supporting me throughout this, and you'll be pleased to know that I did record quite a few things before everything got packed up, and I just need to do the piece to cameras and then they're good to go. So yeah, and yeah, new camera, so no more GoPros.
Hit record. It's so wide. Oh, so wide. So wide.
But anyway, no more fucking around, it's been too long. Dave, MS Paints, and everything you want to know about making a coastal diorama that might have pirates on it. So I gave myself 5 days to make this, and that would be between Monday and Friday of the week I set aside, and I spent the hours between 9 AM and 4 PM on Monday playing Ghost of Tsushima, so
El pánico.
4 days. We'll say I had 4 days to do it. Now there's plenty of techniques getting used in this video, and some of them I've covered elsewhere in their own videos on the channel, so if you want more in-depth descriptions about rocks or sand or landforms, then just click some shit that's flying around my head and, you know, help yourself to see what you can find. Before we get into making the diorama, we need to sit the fuck down and have a chat about theory. Theory is pretty boring stuff, it's pretty dry, it's like cream crackers without any cheese on, which nobody really, not even Waitrose ones. So let's take a little stationary look at the diorama and see what we got on there. Now, even though the diorama is pretty basic and some of this may come across like pretentious wank, games and movies and books and like visual art all do this kind of thing, and it's to activate various parts of your brain that are the subconscious. So we're talking iconography, symbology, the way that colors represent different things, and with the main images you focus on, what those things do around those images. Straight away you can see the diorama is divided into sections by content and color, and the easy way to put it is ocean, beach, jungle. Okay, in the ocean we've got our bad guys, we have stormy waves, a lot of chop, and we have our explorer's boat. On the beach we have a couple more baddies brandishing weapons and the line where the boat is tied, and there's no vegetation, very important, and there's a grave, maybe a pirate grave, just a grave. And in the jungle we have our heroes, a treasure chest, a waterfall, a spring, and the jungle vegetation itself, trees and such, and you know, a lot of the color green, basically a lot of life. If I take you to the board again, it's a transition maybe from death to life, or life to death if you want to go that way, and they're opposites. Now opposites don't need to just be black and white, you can have all kinds of things that your subconscious recognizes as opposites. You can have good mother and bad mother, and you can have rebel, and you can have cop, and human, and inhuman. So from those images and this diorama, when you're next doing a diorama, have a think about how you want to convey conflict. It could be the use of weather, it could be the use of basing effects, like maybe snow and frost that moves with a character across the board. It doesn't move on the diorama unless you want to, unless you're fucking crazy and you want to motorize that. but you know what I'm saying. And look at the story that I'm trying to tell. We have a threat coming from the ocean, and the ocean is also where our heroes need to go to escape. But their boat is surrounded by an enemy, and the only secure line that's tying that boat to the beach is mouldy and covered in seaweed, and it's weak and is under threat of being severed by one of them Scooby-Doo guys. The beach has a pirate grave and serves as a threshold of peril, I guess, that our heroes are avoiding. Note how all of them are standing on a jungle floor and none of them are standing on the sand. And the campfires are there to look cool. At least I think they look cool. And the prize slash treasure that they have captured is behind them being defended in the jungle, and you can see the rope. They've pulled it out of the water, out of the spring, which represents life. You could say, yeah, okay, that is pretty wanky. I mean, I do agree that is kind of wanky, but that is how you basically tell a story through other things apart from your main subjects. Now, I've talked in the past about a base putting a model over, which basically means the base is as important as the model. It doesn't need to be the focus, but it is as important because it helps tell and communicate a story. Now just think, if this diorama was nothing but beach and they were pulling that chest out of just a hole in the ground and it was all beach, maybe there was a couple of palm trees, it wouldn't mean anything. It wouldn't be as dramatic, there wouldn't be the ocean chopping the waves, the threat from the water, and it just wouldn't look as cool. And that's the theory out of the way. Let's build some boards. I chose pine and 3mm MDF for my frame and board constructions. I like my boards to be light, and given my MS-induced love of dropping things when I don't want to, this seemed the way to go. And with 4 days on the clock, there'll be a lot of moisture on here and it's only going to get heavier anyway, so I gotta start from the lightest point possible. And I'm just going to tack in some nails to hold this guy. Fucking... As of making this video, I'm so glad I've got a new painting space set. Gorilla Glue, or polyurethane glue I think it is, to be less exact, is going to hold this guy together, along with the nails. As the glue picks up moisture, it activates and it cures into a hard foam, and this expands into gaps, such as it does. And with a little helpful squirt of water, you can be rock solid and ready to move on in about 20 minutes, kinda like Viagra. Now this may seem like not the best choice of glue, but when you factor in that we've got 4 days to make this, and even with stuff like sculptor mold, this board is gonna stay wet for the duration of working, like not shit sliding round or whatever, like Schwarzenegger on ice skates. Schwarzenegger on ice skates. Come on. It's going to hold a lot of moisture in the board, especially when we start throwing PVA and we start sealing it with isopropyl alcohol and PVA. I don't think, in hindsight, this thing actually dried until fully about a week after it was done. A glue that is activated by moisture, holding the entire structure together, but you're going to need that. I'm protecting my MDF, kind of, by sealing it with concentrated PVA. This stuff dried pretty quick, but it's mostly there to stop ludicrous amounts of moisture from getting into the wood so it doesn't warp. Gorilla Glue again on this freshly formed plaster is the only glue that will really do the job in the short time we have. If I was doing this with PVA, we'd have to wait 24 hours after everything and it probably still wouldn't stick to wet plaster. Not going to say what I did here because frankly it well may be the dumbest thing I've done in a while. Could have just moved ahead and put the MDF backplate on for this, but it was late and I didn't want to get the jigsaw back out, so I coffee stirred the cliff face. Again, Gorilla Glue and a lot of patience. Well, the worst thing about this is that I sat there for like, what? Maybe 5 hours fucking around with this thing. And it probably took about 3.5 hours for me to realize, actually, this might be the dumbest thing I've consistently done without thinking, is this consistently dumb? So just put the back plate on next time. Just wake your neighbors up with a jigsaw. Just So moving on from me being thick as fuck, I decided to pop out for about half an hour to get some fresh air and to also raid my neighbour's bins for polystyrene scraps. Because I was all out of polystyrene and all in on saving the environment, so this stuff is gonna go to good use. I'm building up the landforms here and keeping the weight down by using polystyrene. And it's a high to low on the slope, down to the water, simples. You've seen me building these before. Head over to my Scenic Bases tutorial for Warhammer if you'd like clarification on this stuff. But pine bark, plaster and rock carving. Voila! It looks like shite. But we're going to use plaster to plug these gaps and cover up about 60% of this pine bark. So my planning for this diorama, I put up a post about it on Facebook, like just a piece of wood with about 5 figures on it. And then when I said in the post that I was just going to stare at this for half an hour and then just absolutely go for it, that's pretty much what I did. That's not to say you shouldn't plan a diorama out. I just didn't have the time to plan it. I kind of planned on the fly, like, oh yeah, that'll look cool, yeah, let's do some water there. Actually, no, let's set this on the moon. But when I was talking about theory earlier, that doesn't mean you have to do everything on paper beforehand. You don't have to write everything down. You don't have to get planning permission. You don't have to ask your nan's cousin's dog. None of that. It's just kind of things that you should think about as you go, maybe. And as I'm demonstrating, thinking on the fly is totally fine. Seen me using this nondescript pointy stick before, and this stick is the new hotness. With my MS and it being summertime and working in a hot attic room, my grip was starting to fail me, so I started gouging and cutting and carving with some shit clippers instead of the stick that I normally use. And actually the enlarged grip and the double prong action make this the perfect nondescript double pointy stick for carving plaster into rock faces. A channel first now, let me introduce you to Sculptor Mold, that is homemade. Now there are quite a few different brands of this out there, obviously the one that's called Sculptor Mold, and the one I recommend is the modelling compound by Geek Gaming Scenics, which is basically sculptor mold, but the guy doesn't scrimp on the plaster, and the plaster is the key agent in making sure that this is ready to work in about 15-20 minutes. You can just go over the top of this, no problem. But I have all the materials to mix it on my own, mostly. I'm kind of low on plaster, so my mixture is mostly going to be paper pulp shredded. It won't go as hard as fast, but that's kind of what I'm stuck with if I want to get this done real quick. The benefits of the mixture is that you can get your landforms done, sculpted and ready to paint or work on in about half an hour top end. Obviously with conventional fillers or cements, this can take up to 24 hours for a stable surface. Once I got my main landforms on, I'm gonna fit the sidings with more MDF. And Gorilla Glue to seal it up. And some more modelling compound on top, just to smooth out that transition. And getting ready for our first coating of sand. I'm going heavy with the PVA to add another layer of protection, and because I'm going to throw a shitload of sand on this, it needs to stick to that. I don't really want to paint this stuff since I used so little plaster in the modelling compound, and because it's still pretty wet, I'm going to use actual sand from an actual beach instead of sand-coloured paint layers from my base coat, if that makes sense. I'm going to wet this through to help the PVA underneath soak into it as well. Just going to palm this board off for a minute. And while the PVA does a thing, it's time to make some palm trees. So grab yourself a big old handful of gardening wire. I've folded it and I'm twisting it and I'm clipping it at both ends. Just keep twisting and then pull a single piece of wire out, or maybe two, and wrap it around the trunk of the tree. I mostly learned about these from Mel the Terrain Tutor, get well soon Mel, but I've simplified it a little bit. I use bog roll and PVA to cover the trunks. I'm using milliput or any kind of clay really, air drying, to round off the end of the trunk to taste. Be sure to leave enough wire hanging out at either end, A for the stability and B for the leaves. I'm simulating the bark by collecting bolts of wood chip. Stop it. Stop it. Mate, come on. Thank you.
Hijo de puta esclerosis múltiple.
Bang them in the milliput and add some super glue. These are some kind of synthetic leaves, not plastic. They're more like nylon fabric, I guess. I found these on Amazon, but they're kind of too small for the palm trees that I want to make. So I'm going to turn this into a ferny bush instead. I had high hopes that boys would still stock these fake plants, and they do. I used these on my last lot of palm trees, and there's just not anything really that much better, I guess. Just cut them to palm shape and slice down the side. Be fairly rough here. You can take a few chunks out if you want to, and it gives it that distinct palm leaf look. And just bend out a length of the wire at the top and glue it down. And that's pretty much how palm trees do, barring a bit of dry brushing on the trunk if you're feeling flush. I've added a few rocks onto the board using Gorilla Glue, while nobody was looking of course. And these rocks are plaster mold leftovers and pine bark. And I'm blasting these guys with a black undercoat and spraying grey from above just to get a little bit of shade on there. These creepers and vines are made from coconut fibre. If you don't know what coconut fibre is, don't worry, I'm going to cover a Basing Essentials video at some point in the near future. Back to thinking on the fly and not even vaguely thinking about my fucking deadline, I think this diorama would benefit from some lighting, specifically campfires, in case I want to do a spooky Scooby-Doo night shoot on it. These are just sticks from the garden, no paint, no nothing, just sticks and glue. I've added a few more scatter rocks and super glued them down. This is Clearfix, also I think available from Geek Gaming Scenics. I use this stuff a lot from now on this board, like fire, seaweed, waves, waterfalls, you name it, Clearfix is there. And for the fire, just pile it onto the LED bulb and give it 15 minutes to chill by itself. Once you've waited, use a cocktail stick or some other nondescript pointy stick to tease the clear fix up into a fire shape. You can also paint this stuff once it's cured if you want, and the results are pretty snazzy. Now I'm using a mixture of different enamel washes for me rocks. Watered down paint works too, but I didn't have the time to wait for it to finish fucking drying, so I used white spirit and enamels. I'll be getting more into white spirit and enamel and oil washes further down the line, but basically you can pile that crap on, blast it with a hairdryer, and you are good to work on top of it in about 5 minutes. Just drop it on in patches and then use the white spirit to spread it around where you'd like. Our next ground covering is going to be Tropical Beach from Geek Gaming Scenics. Love those guys, love, as you can tell. This ready-made stuff is ideal for throwing onto bases and dioramas and looks perfect at 28mm to about 35 scale. And for the jungle floor, I'm using, well, Forest Floor from Geek Gaming Scenics. I take some time before I finish for the day to wet the surface with water and dish soap, that's a nice mixture, and seal it all up with watered down PVA. Along with the ground cover, I use some tea leaves and some green herbs from Tesco. Like actual mixed herbs from the food section, like an oregano and shit, and Italian herbs. They're great for jungles and forests. They had a little splash of colour, they had a little bit of texture, and when you get different kinds of tea as well, like just stuff out of PG Tips or whatever, or actual big chunky tea leaves, I don't know where you get your tea from, that stuff can really add some extra dimensions. Can look a bit silly next to a 28mm model, but it's interesting. Now, I don't know what it is about my body chemistry, but static grass applicators just do not work for me. In fact, I have better success with glue and just using my hands to dab the grass on. Tufts and diorama plants were added from Diorama Precipe.
It's Diorama Precipe.
Thank you, Tony.
Diorama Precipe. Where do I get to be in the video?
This is a company based in Italy and they make incredible diorama plants. Do check them out. And send me some free shit, please. Some blended turf colours from Woodland Scenics get thrown down to ease some of those colour transitions and to help the different materials blend together. And Clearfix is back again, available from Geek Gaming Scenics. And this time it's for the waterfall. You're going to learn to love this product by the end of the video. It's pretty good at defying gravity, but take some time to let the first chunk dry a little bit before adding another part. This waterfall probably took about an hour, which when compared to using stuff from Woodland Scenics is actually unbelievable, so bear that in mind. That's the general rule with Clearfix. Whatever you want it to do, apply it to the area, leave it 15 minutes, do a final sculpt, let it cure, keep an eye on it in case it starts to sag. Obviously this can take a little bit of patience, but to be honest, if you're already interested in water effects, I would hope you would go in there with a patient mindset. Because water effects, when they go right, still take time. When they go wrong, they take your soul. Now you will have noticed that even though I'm using quite a lot of hobby specific products, I'm not using them where you might think I am. So there's absolutely no woodland scenic stuff going on here for the water. A, because I would have bankrupted myself on that shit. And also, I have 4 days to make this diorama. I can't be adding a 1mm layer, leave it 24 hours, another 1mm layer, leave it 24 hours. Like, it's 20. This is 25 pounds. Garbage. And speaking of woodland scenics, or the distinct lack thereof, we're going to move on to the water now. This is 2-part epoxy resin, 24-hour cure, and it is glass clear from CFS Fiberglass. You can obviously get this kind of stuff elsewhere at different prices, and I'm sure if you live in America you can probably get about 18 litres of this stuff for 5 cents or whatever. And I've mixed this with a drop or two of Agrax Earthshade just to tint it so you can't see the bottom of this hole. Mixing up another batch for the ocean, this time tinted with Koala Green Shade, and 2 drops are enough to tint this. And by the end you won't be able to see the bottom, so go easy on it. I probably should have used less. Using a small blowtorch or creme brulee burn or whatever it is to remove any of the bubbles from the resin. On the last day, my workspace was in such absolute chaos and I didn't have any time to keep setting up the camera. Honestly, I switched over to just using my phone. I did a second layer of resin for the ocean and this time tinted it with a sky blue paint. Now I'm adding Liquitex gloss gel here, which I don't actually like the finished look of, so I'm going to go back to gloss Mod Podge, I think. I'm using the Clear Fix again on this rope, which is actually made out of string, believe it or not. This time with a mind to go and paint it dark green so it looks like seaweed. And again, Clear Fix, I'm going to dump it out to make a basic wave shape. If you want your waves taller, then do your first layer, wait 15 minutes to go firm, and then dump another load on top. Now white spirit can be used to soften the rough edges of this stuff, but it made my resin underneath a little bit cloudy, but that might just be because I hadn't cured it fully, I don't know. And all you really need to do after this is sort the gaps in your joinery, because I'm a shitty carpenter, and paint the trims and stick your figures on. So that is how I did a coastal diorama in about 4 days. Unfortunately, when I was moving house, my diorama shelf completely fucking stacked it. And, yeah. So this diorama is kind of... The diorama's okay because that's built to last, but the figures got crushed. My other Seraphon diorama took a pretty big bump. Nothing fell off though. But my boards, I do build them pretty well and I build them to last and they're pretty sturdy. So like the boards are absolutely fine. The same can't be said for the Warhammer minis that were on a table and in the direct flight path of the Protoss games Aliens vs Predator dropship. Fully resin, not hollow. I do have some repairs to do. But yeah, these miniatures are absolutely awesome. I got some of the new Squid People from their new Kickstarter that has unfortunately ended now. Sorry, Rich, I meant to get this out in time for that, but I think you successfully funded, so that's all good. And Pirates of the Dread Sea is a fully supported game with numerous different factions and starter bundles available from Dead Earth Games website. As you can see from these models, they're about 35mm scale, probably a little bit chunkier, and they are great, wonderful, full of character, and amazingly they're cast in metal. And to say they're cast in metal, they look brilliant. They're absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for sticking around, guys, and watching this all the way through. You can keep up with me on the social links down below or by subscribing to the channel. Cheers. I'm out of here.